Welcome students for online classes. Today we'll continue with the chapter 3, that is LPG, Liberalization, Privatization and Globalization. In the earlier session we had studied about the liberalization and its reforms. So what is liberalization? Removing the restriction from the government or the controllance from the government and giving the freedom and liberty to the people, that is known as the liberalization. So in this session we'll study about privatization and globalization. Okay. First, what does privatization means? As the name itself tells, taking up all the industrial sector and all the service sector to be privated. So I'll tell the meaning. The greater role of private enterprise and capital in functioning of the economy is called privatization. In functioning of the economy means maybe the production sector, maybe the industrial sector, maybe the agricultural sector. What happens? Earlier what used to happen, everything was under the public sector or the government sector. So what was the main objective? It was about the welfare of the economy. So as there was no proper development in any of the sectors, what happened? The whole economical structure was changed into LPG reforms. So at this particular point of time, what happened? A privatization came into picture. So what does privatization mean? Transfer of the business, industry or any kind of service sector or any kind of companies from public ownership to the private control. So this is known as privatization, where as told earlier, under liberalization what happened, there was no proper permissions to be taken from the government. So there was a freedom or liberty. In the same way, what happened in privatization? So when all the industries or any kinds of business was under public sector, what they used to do, they used to take permission with the government, or any kinds of procurement or any kind of problem was arising at that particular point of time, they used to go under the control of public. So now when privatization came into picture, what happened? There was a drastic change where all the individuals could take their own decisions regarding the loss and regarding the profit of the business, and even regarding the production and distribution of goods and services. So this is known as privatization, where all the ownership was transferred from public sector to the private sector. So what does this privatization involves? The privatization involves two major things. First is disinvestment and second is denationalization. For first, what disinvestment mean? It means sale of a part of equity of public enterprise to private sector. So in the earlier chapter, that was in the year 1950 to 1990, what used to happen? All the controllance was with government. So when I take into percentage, what happens? 51% of the control was with government, and the leftover, the minority percentage, that is 49%, was with the private enterprise. So at that particular point of time, what happened? There was no proper private enterprise or private industries or private business was set up. So because of this, what happened? Because of this disinvestment was taken into picture. So what does disinvestment mean? The sale of part of equity of public enterprise to private enterprise. That is, now what does mainly equity means? Equity is kind of a share which will be done in the business operation. So when I come to stock market, when I come to shares, so what happens when a company needs to start up? At that particular point of time, what is necessary? Capital or investment is very much necessary. So when capital or investment is necessary, what you need to pay money. So at this particular point of time, what will the company issues? The company will issues the shares. What kind of shares? There are n number of shares: equity shares, preference shares, bonds, debentures. So at this particular point of time, equity shares is the priority shares given to the shareholders. So when I go to any company and purchase the shares, so in spite of that, what will I give? If the company calls up for 2000 amount of shares, so what will I do? I will pay 2000 rupees for that company, and that company will give me a bond or a written document of my equity shares. So equity shares is the priority basis where any profit will be earned. The profit money will be divided with the equity shareholders, and even what happens if any loss occurs also, the equity shareholders will pay back the money in return for the betterment of the company. So that is known as equity shares. So what used to happen in earlier, that is before LPG reforms came into picture, overall system was under public. So when privatization came, when everything was under the control of private people or the individuals, what used to happen, there was the sale of the part of equity from the public sector to the private sector, which was one of the better thing for the company to get developed. Okay, now when I come to denationalization, so what is it? It is transfer of ownership from public enterprise to private sector. So what happened, as earlier told, was when everything was under private public control, what the controllance was with government. So now when denationalization came, what it means? It means transferring the ownership from public to private. So by this what happens, there will be freedom, there will be no restriction, there will be no rules and regulations. The import duties, the export duties, maybe any kinds of taxes any kinds of taxes will be reduced. So which is one of the better thing which privatization made, which was one of the positive impact for the economy to develop or to have any kind of growth. So this was one of the better thing happened under the privatization. So the next is the purpose of disinvestment. So what was disinvestment? It was the sale of part of equity of the public sector to the private enterprises. So under this, what happened when disinvestment came into picture, or when disinvestment was taken, what were the purpose or what were the objectives? So first is, it was taken into consideration just because to improve the financial discipline and facilitate the modernization. So what happened, when earlier when there was public sector, or the people or the government only looked after the poverty level people just to bring them up. So at that particular point of time, most of the money, maybe subsidies, maybe any kinds of concessions, was given to them. So because of this, what happened, economy was not taken into consideration. So because of this, what happened, privatization came into picture. So because of this, what happened, even the villages started developing and started becoming urbanized, and it started becoming the modern way. So when there will be development in any kinds of economy, what happens, even the standard of living of the people will also increase. Okay, now when I come to the next one, private capital used to improve the efficiency of public sector. So how the private capital used to improve the efficiency of public sector? First, what happens, when you set up a company, when you set up an industry, what will be your aim or what will be your goal? The major aim will be to earn more and more profit, to have a better standard of living, to have a greater life. So because of this, what happens, you only think about the future point of time in spite of thinking what is in present. So with the present criteria, what do? You try to reach your goals. In the same way, what happens, when private capital will be put into the public sector, what happens, even the economical structure, maybe any kinds of infrastructure, maybe the education pattern, maybe the medical facility will also improve. So this is about being privatized. So next is, privatization could improve strong motivation to inflow of foreign direct investment. First, what is FDI? Foreign direct investment is the foreign people or the foreign companies which will be investing in our current economy. The people, whoever invests in our current economy, they will not invest simply. In spite of that, what will they expect? They expect a return, they expect a profit. So at this particular point of time, what happens, when any foreign companies or any kinds of industries check out all the necessary things of our current economy, at that particular point of time, they will check whether this company has improved in this particular span of time, whether they have a proper profit. So at that particular point of time, what kind of goods and services they provide, what kind of marketing strategy are they providing. After looking into all these necessary things, the foreign companies or foreign investors will invest in our current economy, so that it will be a betterment for our current economy. So what happens, privatization even helps in doing the in encouraging or in motivating the people by doing the foreign direct investment, which is one of the positive thing under privatization. So this was about privatization. Okay, so now we'll go on to the globalization pattern. So what happened in the globalization? First, let's know what is the meaning of globalization. Opening up of the economy for world market by attaining international competitiveness is called as globalization. So when I compare to the earlier process, what used to happen when there was large number of protection given by the public, what used to happen, there was no proper development by the economy, or the people were only indulged in the work which public sector used to give them, or they, as there was many restrictions, as there was many rules and regulations. Because when after that, when privatization came into picture, what happened, the economy started to, not only privatization, even the liberalization, what happened, the economy or the people or the individuals started to opening up themselves. So they started to think by themselves, by making their own decisions, by taking their own decisions, by setting up new industries, which was one of the positive impact. So even what happened, under globalization, it started to open up the economy globally in the sense, not only inside our own nation, even outside the nation, even going to the abroad countries, maybe presenting any kinds of products, maybe competing with their products, maybe any kinds of quality, maybe any kinds of quantity which was necessary for the production process, all the necessary, or and even maybe adopting of new technology also adopted by our economy to have a proper competition with the global people. So this is known as globalization, opening up the economy for the world market by attaining the international competitiveness. Okay, later, because of this, what happened, because of this, globalization involved in many criteria or in many rules and regulations. First was removal of restriction on the movement of goods and services, capital and technology between nations. First and foremost, what happened, what did the government do? The government removed the restrictions or the trade barriers between the countries. So when you tell globalization, you talk about the abroad countries, that is inter countries. You know, you will not talk about the interrelations, you will start talking about the other countries. So at this particular point of time, what happened, when you started to export things, import things, even upgrading the technology from other countries, what happened, there was no restrictions in taking up or giving any kinds of products and services. Next, when I come to the identification of Indian economy with the global economy. So at this particular point of time, what happened, how the identification started to happen, because of the good quality products which was provided by our economy. In the earlier chapter, what we had learned that India is rich in resources. So when we Indians have we have very much raw materials or maybe any kinds of many minerals. At this particular point of time, what happens, we can produce our own things, we can produce all the necessary items which is necessary for the economy, and we can compete with the international things, so international people. So at this particular point of time, what happens, there will be identification of Indian products globally. Okay, earlier on the eve of independence, what kind of products which was identified by the whole global world, that was regarding the handicrafts. So in the same way, what happens, when days pass, even the products which is being produced in India, it is being globally identified by n number of people. And next is the creation of borderless world. At this particular point of time, what is it, borderless world? In the sense, there is no boundaries for our own satisfaction. In the same way, what happens, when you produce something, when you want to sell something, when you want to gain knowledge, or when you want to gain what you tell, maybe any kinds of reputation, the name and fame from many number of people, what happens, you need to open up yourself to the whole economy. So when you want to open up for yourself for the whole economy, what happens, there will be a creation of borderless world. So there will be no discrimination that this is this country, so they will not produce any kinds of product, so when I go to any other country, I can do better way. So there is no restrictions, or there is no discrimination between any kinds of things. So this is known as the creation of borderless world. And even what happens when you come to the borderless world, when you go and conversate with the people outside the economy, what happens, there will be a chain of link with other people also. So at this particular point of time, what happens, there will be a cordial relationship with the other countries. So this is also one of the important and major thing happened under the globalization. So this was about globalization. So the assignment for today is give the meaning of privatization and what do you mean by globalization. Thank you, students.